Okay, I'm gonna greet the people so long, and then we'll just have another half a minute if people come in late. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everybody from all over. We really don't like having, or I certainly don't like having virtual meetings anymore. It's just so much better if you can see people and have them in the room. But we also need to be sensible about how we use people's time and spend our funders' money. So this meeting is a virtual one. Thank you, Gabriella, for being here. And I see we've got James, and I can't see Ken. Is Ken around? I haven't seen his name.
No, Linda, sorry, Ken is on PTO, is on vacation. In addition to that, it's his birthday. So I thought that it was good to release him and not to interrupt his holidays, his vacations. So we have some staff members with us in case I need some support, if you don't mind. Including Linda Beek, who is the new IESBA director. And that's the reason why you're not seeing Ken.
And we saw a name in your report, and you can tell Ken this morning. I heard on the radio that today is also the birthday of Tom Cruise. So he shares a birthday with famous people. Or Tom Cruise should probably feel quite honored to share a birthday with Ken. All right, I think we can kick off, Gabriella. We have had our, we always have a preparation session, and we had that last week where we spent time just to go through the observation memo that Begonia has put together for us, and we obviously also looked at the CAG observation. So it's nice to just prepare ourselves. It's crunch time now. We understand that sustainability is sort of right there on top of the features of both of your boards. What I'm going to do is I have some notes of how we sort of summarize our comments, but I thought it would be useful to first just hand over to you, that you can talk through your slides at a high level, or say what you need to from your side. Then I'll sort of just summarize some of the comments that we made from our session last week, but also hand back to my colleagues if they've got comments or questions to you, and then we take it from there. So welcome to you and your team, and it's nice to see all of these names on the screen, and to see all of these videos of everybody. So over to you. Thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Linda, and I hope that you don't mind that the staff is here, but I think it's also important for them to see how things work. And since these meetings are now open to public observation, I thought it was not a problem that they would be here. So thank you very much, Linda. That's exactly what I thought, that after Begonia's participation in our board meeting last June, and the debriefing session that you must have had, that I would not need to go into too much detail, and preferably leave some time for your questions and comments on the work that IESBA is doing. Nevertheless, I think that these slides may help structure the conversation. So if you don't mind, I don't know if Claudia could share the slides and advance them. I think that Linda had made that request. Otherwise, I'll try to share them or ask someone from the staff to do that.
Let me just check. Apologies, I haven't checked with Claudia. Claudia S., are you able to share the slides?
The only thing I would say, Linda, is that the advantage is if Gabriella or team can do it, you can then move the slides forward at the moment you choose. So it can actually be easier.
So it is maybe easier, because it will be more intuitive if you get one of your people to share it, Gabriella.
And then
thank you.
So if you give me 1 second, I'll try to do it myself, but I was not prepared for that, so I need 30 seconds to do that. Just give me.
No problem. And while you do that, Gabriella, I'll ask the board members to hold their comments back and the questions to you, maybe to the places where you want to pause and ask for questions or comments, or towards the end. It's up to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. So 1 second, I'm sorry for this.
Don't worry, Gabriella. It's also true everyone's got your slides in our pack, so that's also the case. So there's no pressure.
can you see the slides?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, you can. Thank
Yes,
you,
can you see
Gabriela.
the? Okay, I'm sorry for this, but I was not prepared, so it took me some time to save them in my screen. So thank you very much. I'll try to be quick, as I said, but give you the flavor of what's happening at the IESBA and about the most relevant developments over the last months, and namely since we met for the last time. So in December last year, and I think that I have had the opportunity to tell you this, but in December last year, the IESBA approved 2 project plans, one on sustainability standards and one on the use of experts. The first of these projects is divided in 2 different work streams. One, to develop profession-agnostic independent standards for use by all sustainability assurance practitioners. So, which means independence standards for sustainability, and another one to develop specific ethics standards which are relevant to sustainability reporting and assurance. So basically, one of the work streams is on independence for assurance. The other is on ethics standards for reporting and assurance, both related with sustainability information. The third project is on the use of experts. And again, I had the opportunity to share the reasons why we decided to move forward with this project. But not only there was a clear call from our stakeholders, namely from the PIOB, but not only, but also our consideration was that the completeness of this project to develop a robust infrastructure for sustainability information would not be complete without this part of the project. And this is because the use of experts is already and will become intensive by providers of sustainability assurance and also sustainability reporting, but also because it was being already extremely necessary with respect to other areas where we have been advancing our work, like tax planning, technology, etc. The use of experts is becoming more and more important. We know that there are some provisions already in the IESBA provisions, but and I'll get there. We thought with the help and contribution of our stakeholders that it was necessary to move forward with something to make the experts, the use of experts, more robust in terms of ethics and independence. So, can you see still the slides moving? Okay. With this purpose, and after this decision to develop these standards, what became absolutely clear to the IESBA was that we needed to gather extensive and very robust input from our stakeholders. And given the difficulty of the project, the newness of the project on sustainability and everything that is unknown and uncertain for everybody, and also the very stringent and restricted timeline, we needed to get these inputs before we started drafting the standards. Also because there was some strategic decisions that we had to make and that were subject to intensive discussions by the board, where we needed to listen to our stakeholders before making those decisions stable and move forward with the drafting. And with that purpose, we organized you already know that these roundtables, these global sustainability roundtables, 4 roundtables, one in Paris, Singapore, Sydney, and New York, in 10 days or something like that, at the end of March, start of April, where these roundtables were extremely successful. We managed to have more than 140 participants from a very wide range of stakeholder groups, namely from non-practitioners and non-professional accountants, and people coming from very different backgrounds, experience, etc. And this was one of the goals of these roundtables, was to make sure that we would be able to listen and gather input from non-professional accountants who are involved in providing sustainability-related assurance services. So the result or the main takeaways of these roundtables was that we got a very broad and almost unanimous support for professional agnostic ethics and independent standards for sustainability assurance engagements. We had an overwhelming or very considerable support for developing a new section in the code, the so-called Part 5, to introduce professional agnostic standards and to make it more user-friendly, and I'll get there in one moment. We got some specific feedback and input on specific ethics issues for sustainability reporting, and the importance of acknowledging the importance of, in the near future, considering developing professional agnostic standards for sustainability reporting. And here, well, I'll get back to this topic as well, but I'll like to flag that probably here the question is not whether we should develop profession agnostic standards or not. Also because the separation line between what is profession agnostic and what is not that clear. This is not black and white, but here in this area the question is a little bit different, and it's about who should be subject to the same ethics standards irrespective of their background. But I'll come back to this topic again. So going to the next slide. The IESBA agreed that ethics and independent standards for sustainability assurance engagements will be introduced in Part 5 of the code. And this was a decision of our June board meeting. After some discussions that we had in March, in our March board meeting in Abu Dhabi, in June, it was possible to come to a unanimous decision on developing a new part in the code. You may recall that at the start there were three options that we were putting forward for discussion. One was to fully integrate these new standards on Part 4A, independent standards for auditors. The second one would be to develop a separate handbook or a separate code. And the third one, or the intermediate one, was to develop something separated but within the code. This was the option, and this was the option upon the very substantive and substantial input that we got from the roundtables, where 80%, I would say, of the stakeholders were in favor of this option. There was still some support for developing a separated code and a very marginal or not expressive support for integrating these standards in the existing code. And this was because the fully integration of these standards on Part 4A, even if in the future it can be a possible objective once the integrated reporting becomes a reality, this would be extremely difficult for non-professional accountants to follow. They would have to cherry pick what's in it for them and what's not in it for them. And there was a second risk, which was everything that we are going to do on sustainability is new, involves some uncertainty, involves risk, and there was the risk of disrupting what is already robust, stable, solid, etc. in the code with these new standards fully integrated therein. Also, developing a separate code, which could seem at first sight a very good option, and is still possible to consider in the future, just like the integrated one, but there was a risk in terms of timely adoption and implementation, because some jurisdictions mentioned that a new code, a separated code, would involve the necessity of the issuing new legislation, which could take years and could prevent us from being successful in achieving a quick implementation from the jurisdictions. So the halfway, let's call it like that, option, which was to to develop a new part in the code where all the standards, the sustainability, the ethics, and independence standards for sustainability assurance would be contained was the option that managed together the consensus, the full agreement from the board, and this very substantial support from our stakeholders. This new Part 5 will be applicable to all sustainability assurance practitioners, irrespective of whether they are professional accountants or not. So they will all have the same standard, the same level of requirement, the same framework. And this will apply also to any practitioner, irrespective of whether they are also the auditor for financial statements for the same entity. No differences, same framework for everybody. So on the next slide, the scope of this new Part 5, which will cover both ethics and independence for sustainability assurance, will be equivalent in terms of substance and content to the ethics and independence standards for audit engagements, and will apply both to limited and reasonable assurance engagements. And the scope of this Part 5, what will be covered by this Part 5 is sustainability information on which the firm expresses an opinion, which is reported in accordance to a general purpose framework. So we are leaving out for the time being special purpose framework reports, and information which is required to be provided in accordance with law or regulation, or which is publicly available to support any kind of decision making by investors or by any stakeholders. So this is a restricted scope for the time being. We do not leave away, we do not exclude the possibility of, in the near future, extending the scope of this Part 5. But for the time being, the option was to cover what seemed to be the most relevant materials or information that should be subject to very specific and very high quality sustainability assurance framework. So if jurisdiction-specific laws or regulations also require the application of Part 5 to other sustainability assurance engagements, this will be fine. And of course, it will enlarge the scope by this way. For other assurance engagements which do not fall into the scope that we are designing here, the proposal is that Part 1 to 3 and Part 4B of the extant code will still apply. So there will be still a framework, but not the specific and profession agnostic standards framework that we are developing for this specific scope. With respect to the scope of still with respect to the new Part 5, it covers ethics and independence, and as I said. With respect to ethics, what is covered in Part 5 is sustainability assurance engagements that meet the criteria that I have just described, so the criteria of the former slide, and there is an additional and other engagements by the sustainability assurance practitioners for the same client. So there is an extension on ethics, which goes beyond the strict scope of Part 5. It applies to everything that falls into Part 5 in terms of scope, but the providers, the practitioners of these engagements will have to comply with the ethics standards with respect to any other engagement for the same client. So it extends the scope of these standards. And with respect to the services and the activities which are not covered by Part 5, then there is a difference. If the practitioner is a professional accountant, of course, it will always be subject to what is in Part 1 to Part B, 4B of the code. And there will be a specific reminder that they should not need, but that we will anyway make. If the practitioner is a non-professional accountant, then there will be an encouragement from IESBA that they adopt the same ethics standards or other standards which are at least as demanding as the IESBA standards in any situations not covered by Part 5. And this is because we think, and it is our conviction, that any other aspects of conduct of sustainability assurance practitioners may contribute or may impair public trusts that we need to underpin sustainability assurance. A little bit like it happens in the financial world and financial markets regulation, where the conduct of the people, even if it's not directly related to the activity, may impair its ability to provide some services and to be allowed to provide some services. The approach that we are taking here is a little bit the same. It's not only the conduct with respect to the service itself, it's the conduct more in general that it's relevant. And so we encourage non-PAs to take to follow these ethics standards with respect to any other activity, any other situations. On independence, there are many issues, and Begonia, who attended our meeting, may have briefed you about the independence-specific issues that we are intending to cover. What is in this slide are some selected independence issues which are being more subject to a more intense discussion, if I may say so. And this is about the need for any practitioner providing sustainability assurance services to comply with ISQ1, so the quality management systems, which is being a little bit controversial given the level of requirement that will be put on non-professional accountants, which are not that familiar with these standards. The relationship between the scope that we are designing for the Part 5 and the public interest entities, and here I hope I can provide a very clear clarification, because it seems not to be immediately understandable. What we are suggesting is that the nature of the entity which is being subject to a sustainability assurance engagement is only relevant after it is decided whether this engagement falls into Part 5 or not. I mean, what I mean is that first we have to verify the criteria for an engagement to fall into the scope of Part 5, and then if it falls into Part 5, then the PI provision that are applied, we will not make any difference for the time being between applying for the financial for financial reporting purposes and apply for sustainability reporting purposes. This may happen in the future, but it's not the scope of the project for now. So Part 5 will use the high definition, which was recently approved for audit engagements. And jurisdictions, just like for audit engagements, may add entities specified in the context of sustainability assurance if they think that it's important. Finally, the group sustainability assurance engagement, the Part 5, are mostly carried out in the group reporting context.
Gabriella,
Sorry?
I just want to pause for a moment because I can't hear well. It's sort of there's a bit of a glitch, but I don't know if it's just me. I just want to check with the other people if you can still hear Gabriella well.
Not really.
Gabriella, it's as if there's suddenly a little bit of interference in the line. If you maybe just sit a little bit closer to your mic, let's see if it works.
I'll try. Can you hear me better still?
Gabriella, maybe I would suggest switch off your camera. It seems as if the line just suddenly deteriorated. Let's see if that's better.
Okay, can you hear me better?
Because we can hardly hear you.
I'm sorry for that. Well, I'm taking the call from a hotel room, so, and I'm using my own phone internet because the other was not working well. But I'll try to switch. Okay.
It's a little bit better, Gabriella, but not great. Let's just give it a minute and let's see how it goes if you talk.
Well, I don't know exactly what to do. I may try to switch to another internet
No,
service.
Okay, I think we can hear you now. So maybe just keep your
I'll
camera
try to speak. I'll try to speak closer to the mic. But I'll get to. Okay. So I don't know if you want me to repeat what I was saying, but I'm going to be very quick. And if you have questions, I'll try to respond. What I was saying on PI is that the approach is that first we have to decide whether an engagement falls into the scope of Part 5 according to the criteria that I have that I have explained, which are the criteria that we chose. And then, if it falls into the scope of Part 5, then we can see if the client is a PI or not a PI, according to the definition that was recently approved for audit engagements. Finally, with respect to group sustainability assurance engagements, we will address in Part 5 the independence of sustainability assurance team members and firms participating in the group sustainability assurance engagement. And this is because sustainability assurance engagement and the new Part 5 are mostly carried out in a group, in a group reporting context. So this is the issue that we selected just to tell the PIOB that these are the issues or topics which are triggering more a little bit more discussion questions. And finally, on sustainability reporting, and you will allow me to spend some time here because it's really important to make sure that the PIOB, just like our stakeholders, that we share with our stakeholders the reason why we are taking this project forward and why we think it is at least as important as the one on sustainability assurance. Actually, we were urged by some stakeholders, and namely by IESBA, etc., to focus on sustainability assurance standards. It was what was concerning stakeholders the most, probably because it's more visible, probably because it's closer to the IESBA work that was already being undertaken since some time, etc. But after first reflection, we rapidly came to the conclusion that it was not possible to start our ethics house by the roof and developing something for sustainability assurance without thinking about sustainability reporting. So in December, we also approved a sustainability project to revise the code to address ethics for sustainability reporting. They are the first line of defense against greenwashing. Everybody's speaking about greenwashing, the reasons to develop all these standards is greenwashing, but greenwashing is something that happens at the reporting level and not most of the times at the assurance level, and it's always an ethics problem. So we did not have any alternative but think about developing these ethics standards for sustainability reporting. Ethics is a critical part of the infrastructure, and we did not shy away from doing what we had to do. So we also agreed in June to develop ethics standards for sustainability reporting, but not focused in developing these standards. Sorry.
Apologies, Gabriella, but the connection is really poor. So I would ask you to maybe see if you can wrap it up. Let's rather have a little bit of a discussion because we really battle a bit to hear you.
Okay, Linda, I'm so sorry for this. Do you want me to disconnect and try to connect again, or?
Oh, I didn't get that, Gabriella. Do you want me to maybe pause and get the board members to make comments? Because I think they have seen your slides and your report. Gabriella, can you hear me?
I cannot
Okay,
hear you,
all
Linda.
right.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can't hear you well, but maybe let's pause and let's get some comments, and maybe I'll share a few comments with you. I suddenly have this terrible background noise because my neighbors downstairs are doing a tiling project and they clearly doing something very noisy at the moment. So I hope it doesn't bother you too much. When we had our preparation session, Gabriella, we had very good feedback from Begonia. And also obviously from the CAC meeting. So I'm also going to, just before I go into some of our comments, maybe just ask Galen. Galen, we've seen your report. Maybe just make a few comments from your side specifically on sustainability, and then I'll give you, share some of our thoughts, and then we'll go into questions. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. So in my report, I don't recall whether I had indicated the level of support from the CAG, but the CAG, I think, is supportive of this notion of the Part 5, and for all the reasons that Gabriella had indicated. And I also indicated in my report that I was not able to attend the June meeting, so all of the nuances that Gabriella has been covering, I'm a little bit weak on. The one thing that I am concerned about is this notion of encouragement, and I think I put that in my report. Encouragement to non-PAs, that's going to be tricky. How that gets balanced, because all along we've been talking about having the same level of ethical standards for non-practitioners as what is expected of practitioners. So that, Linda, I think that's probably my primary concern at this point.
Thank you, and thanks for that report, Galen. So maybe a couple of comments from our side, Gabriella, and I'll get my colleagues to add to that, because I never do proper justice to their very extensive and comments. But firstly, well done on all the stakeholder outreach, and with this project, probably more than any, it's really, really important to talk to people and understand what the issues and difficulties are, and you and your board have done an amazing job to do that and to get there. We had some feedback at our last meeting, as you know, from some of our board members that attended some of the roundtables, and you've now put together a reference group. So we thought that is really good, and that's really important. It also seems as if there are so many moving parts, and you've done a lot of work to decide what is going to fit where, and the concept of having Part 5, which is a one-stop place for everybody to go, especially the ones that don't necessarily typically use the code and are familiar with the code, the non-accountants, is really important. It just feels like there's a couple of really big, the how and where is sort of there now, but what's the answer to the question? It feels as if those big ticket items of sort of the strategic decisions on what are the independence requirements for assurance providers, can you do the audit of the company and also do the assurance of the sustainability report? Must the experts of the assurance providers be independent? It's going to be very important and interesting to see what the content is and how it's going to fit into that in all these really important strategic discussions around non-audit services and independence requirements and all of that. And I think that's the one area that we're really looking forward to seeing, because we know that December is not that far off. The one or two other areas maybe that I would like to flag from our side is the whole thing about definitions and consistency of definitions between the two boards. And I think at the PIOB we recognize that it can't be exactly the same, but it will also create a lot of confusion if there's significant disparity between the principles, definitions, terminology used by the two boards. And maybe just a little bit of your thinking around that would be useful. As you link into the work of the IESBA and the similar similar definitions and terminology being used by them. And then maybe the one other important thing is also just, I don't think anybody, and you emphasize it as well, can emphasize enough how important experts will be in all of this, you know, and how important the rules and the strategic thinking of what's the outcome, how do we protect the public interest when it comes to the assurance providers versus the preparers and other accountants and all their ethics rules versus the experts, and just the content that we're thinking is, you know, going to be very important and important to bed down. I'm going to pause for a second and just check with Begonia, who observed the meeting, if she's got anything to add.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, Gabriela, for the explanation. It's a pity that your voice was not properly heard, but we already have the slides, so we have been through them in advance. So don't worry, because we had them. And also, I was, well, some of the comments that Linda made were also my questions or my suggestions, which is about the definitions. I realize that we know that the IESB is going to publish the EDs immediately, and that puts IESBA in a more difficult position. But having different definitions, unless this, if it is not justified, I think it is not good for the public interest. It's difficult to explain for the public, for the interested people, that sustainability information is not the same for the two boards. So this is something that worries us, I think. And regarding the new part 5 that, as you said, and also Galen mentioned, which has been, well, a good solution, because having a new code was difficult at the moment, and putting that in part 4A would have been difficult for non-PAs. But we have we don't really see how classifying an assurance engagement in part 4B or in 5, in the new 5, how this difference is going to affect to the, well, the independence and some other things. So the limit between being in part 5 or not, how this is going to affect, which are the implications of these two groupings, because you are now preparing this part 5 with the new ethics and independence rules, standards, but then if the engagement does not fit there, what will happen? Will be 4B, and is 4B equally demanding? So we see that difficult thing, unless I misunderstood something in my observation. This is what I have understood, and this is my main concern. Otherwise, I think that there is also the problem of external experts, but this is something that is not only affecting sustainability, but to make it more clear that these people need to be, well, seen and perceived by independents from the public, by the stakeholders. It's not, as someone said in the meeting, it's not something that should be in the shoulders of the readers of the information. This should be something clear from the beginning. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, and Gabriela. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen. I quickly want to check with Sandy if she's got anything from the CAG feedback, and then back to you. And while we look for other hands, Sandy, anything from your side?
I wasn't on the IESBA CAG. I was on the IAASB CAG. Is that what you mean?
I'm completely confused today, because I assigned the IAASB CAG today and the IESBA CAG to you. Who was the IESBA CAG again? Was that you, Dave?
It was yeah, I did the IESBA CAG. That was back in March.
Yeah, it was a while
However,
back.
so it was a while. A lot has really transpired since then that Gabriela has covered.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so back to you. Let me just see. I have a hand from Tom. If you're comfortable, Gabriela, I'm going to take Tom's comment and then back to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Linda. And thank you very much for the presentation, Gabriela. I think that's your effort, especially on the sustainability reporting side, is very, very impressive. And then I really think it's a very good progress on that work stream too. And then the one question I would like to ask is that the use of expert field, because I originally thought that the PIOB is very how can I say, supportive of the project in the sense that the independence of external expert is very critical in the establishing the ecosystem of the sustainability assurance and sustainability reporting. But how do you evaluate the importance of other experts like the management expert or the internal expert? And my personal thinking is that the message should be a little bit more clear, because the core message we would like to convey is that the independence of external expert is critical. But currently, I think that's the project covers not only the external experts, but the ethics of management experts and then the internal experts. I understand that also important, but there might be some sort of the strategy for their conveying the message of the core message of the importance of the project. Thank you.
Okay, Gabriela, let's hope your sound is better now. Let's hear.
I hope so. Can you hear me? No.
I think you must talk, and let's maybe switch off your video again, and we'll turn up our sound and see if we can hear you.
I'm so sorry. I'm very frustrated with this situation. It should not happen, but I don't know what I can do. I also have a new laptop, which is giving me some trouble. I don't know if it's the case. I'm so sorry.
It's definitely a little bit better when your video is off. If you just sort of maybe just take it a little bit slowly. Thanks, Gabriela.
Okay. Linda, I hope that you can at least understand part of what I say, and I'm going to speak slow and try to address all the questions. First one, a comment from Galen on the encouragement to non-practitioners. Of course, we understand the concerns with respect to going a little bit beyond, which is the traditional area of intervention or the objectives of the IESBA. But we really feel, after all the discussions that we had, that taking these non-practitioners on board urges us and forces us to take some action in areas where before we were not active. We are developing these standards also for non-professional accountants, which the ones who act in the area that will be covered by Part 5 will be covered automatically. But that doesn't mean that they should not look at our standards and use them as extensively as possible when they are acting in areas which are not covered by Part 5. And so the court has discussed this, and it is our conviction and the proposal of the task force that even if we are not covering these other areas for now, there should be some encouragement from the IESBA for them to start having it in practice. So this is probably a different approach from a standard setter perspective, but we think that we have responsibilities in shaping the behavior as much as possible in terms of ethical approach from practitioners in general. So the second question on the consistency between the definitions of IESB and IESBA, we are working as much as possible and we work as fast as possible to make sure that all the coordination possible was put in place before the IESB was going to release the exposure draft. This has been a very intensive work, taking a lot of well, energy and focus from both staff teams at IESBA and IESB. So we are, of course, not only aware that we set up an objective to do whatever we can to make sure that the definitions and approaches are consistent for the benefit of all. But we still, and I think I was very clear about this in our last meeting with PIOB, that the quality of the final products may ask sometimes for some differences. We should not give away the quality of the definitions and of the projects only to meet the objective of having the same definitions. This means that in some cases it may be necessary, and it's not because we want it to be different, we or IESB. It's not because we didn't manage to coordinate. It's not because of any of those reasons, but because in substance, the approach is different. It is different because the scope is different. Just to start, because IESBA has definitions which in many cases will serve both the reporting and assurance area. Secondly, because the IESB approach by nature, because it's their mandate, it's much more focused on the procedure, how to do assurance. The focus of the IESBA is a behavioral approach, so more substantive. And this may have, in some cases, some impacts and some very natural and necessary impacts on the definitions and the tasks for the quality of the final product of both boards. What I'm saying in a nutshell is that we are aware of the need to be as consistent as possible. We are all from on both sides, IESBA and IESBA, working as much as possible. And I'm not going to go into the details of this coordination practices because you don't need to know it. But what I'm saying is that this is being put in place in a very substantial way. But sometimes we may come to the conclusion that we need some slightly different concepts or definitions to serve the purpose and the objective and the content and substance of our projects. So we are grateful for some comments made by the PIOB as well as from other stakeholders, although the PIOB has been more focusing on this topic. Which have been constructive. We will not get along the way, even if the IESB has already put their standards out for consultation, and we still have some. There is some common journey ahead of us, but I'd like to leave this idea that sometimes, for the sake of quality and the projects, we might need to be slightly different in our approach to definitions and concepts. Then on the part 4, part 5, part 4B, Begonia, I think if I understood well your question is more like we have a scope for part 5, which is a limited scope. Some engagements will fall into the scope of part 5, and so they will have this new fit for purpose, profession agnostic standards, and the others which will not fit into part 5 will not benefit from the same framework. And your question is, what will happen? Which impacts will this difference make? Well, of course, we will have a two-tier, if I may say so, system, just like it currently exists for audits. There are some audit engagements which currently fall into part 4A, which is more stringent, more exigent, etc., and others which point to part 4B. And I'm seeing you nodding, so this is probably not your question. But how I understood it, yes, we will have two different groups of engagements. Some of them that we consider to be more relevant at this stage and therefore subject to the standards or the standards that we are developing should have them as its subject, while the others will still benefit or can still use the code as it is in part 4B or with respect to ethics in part 1, 2, 3, etc. But if I'm wrong about your question, I'll be happy to listen to you again and try to be more precise in terms of my answer.
Well, thank you, Gabriela. Can I insist?
Yes, okay. Yeah. And I'm going to take all the comments again, Gabriela, if it's okay. I'm going to go to Begonia and then to Claudia, and I've got one more comment as well. So you first, Begonia, please come back.
If you want to give the floor to Claudia, but my point is that it's true, 4A and 4B exist, but 4B is for other engagement that are not audit or reviews. Here we are having assurance, sustainability assurance engagement, same type of engagement, sustainability assurance, in 5 and in 4B. So I don't think it's the same. That's it. But maybe I'm wrong.
Claudia, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Gabriela, for the explanation. I actually have a question, which is a doubt and comes also from the offline discussion that we had with Begonia. And I think I have the same doubt as Begonia raised. Because in the slides, we see, let's say, different instances where part 5A would apply. So we know that we have these different factors, elements that need to be met to have part 5. One of these is the general purpose framework and so on. But then in the slides, and it's just been explained that also when the practitioner is the auditor of the same entity, part 5 would apply. So my question, and now the doubt is, if the practitioner is the auditor of the entity, but all the other elements are not met, which means, for example, it's a special purpose framework and so on, what would it happen? So is this fact that the practitioner is the auditor of the entity is another factor that needs to be met, or is it independent from the other factors? I don't know, Begonia, if I'm also, voicing your own concern or doubt, but reading again that, I also had that doubt. So whether is this an additional element to be considered, or would be independent, from the other considerations, so that part 5 would apply no matter, all the other conditions. So if the practitioner also audits the entity, then part 5 will be applied. Thank you.
And Gabriela, I would suggest maybe not detailed feedback now, but I do think it's going to be important to see, when the words are on the paper and when they all fit together, to see where all of these things end, and maybe just your last comment on the timeline, because there are 2 meetings left, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of work over the summer and so on as well. But just your views on getting that to that place where you want it to be by December as we wrap up on this session. Thanks, Gabriela.
So, Lina, if I understand well, you are asking me not to respond in detail to these questions, but to take them on board for future consideration.
Yeah. Probably not in detail, because that's a sort of a long technical discussion, but because I do think we probably need to see at the next round what the drafting looks like, but maybe just your more general view on the drafting and the timelines and getting stuck in those strategic questions.
Okay. Just one note, very short note on Claudia's and Begonia's question. But if the sustainability provider is a PA, what we are proposing is that if it's a PA and if it falls into the scope of part 5, if the engagement falls into the scope of Part 5 and the provider is a PA, he or she will have to abide by the standards in Part 5, plus everything that already applies to this person because he or she is an auditor. So there is a plus, which is Part 5, plus everything that applies just for the fact that he or she is an auditor. But of course, we will take these comments on board and if necessary, offline as well. Thank you for flagging this because it seems that it's not completely clear and we are looking for some clarity, for full clarity of what we are doing. So if it's not clear for you, we have to make it more clear. In terms of time, I still have a question on the use of experts, but I think that I don't have the time enough to respond to this as well. But very high level response. We are addressing both independence and ethics considerations in this project. The question is that we are taking it from the perspective of objectivity. And of course, objectivity takes independence. So this is the approach taken. And when we speak about objectivity, among other things, it means that independence will impact objectivity. The question is more technical or formal than any other thing. It's about from where do we go into the code to address in substance these topics. Both are under consideration. We understand that independence and experts is something that concerns not only the PIOB, but ourselves as well. There are questions from the stakeholders. The thinking and the development of the basis for this project is not as developed as it is for sustainability because it started later. But we have considerable certainty about the approach that we are going to take, and the answer is both ethics and independence. And then we can go a little bit further into this topic in another occasion if you want, but from a very high level perspective, that's it. In terms of timeline, Linda, yes, there is nothing new with respect to what we had shared with the PIOB before. Since the start, we knew that this was going to be extremely demanding for the IESBA as a very small, team. And in a very short time frame, because we started literally by approving this last December. So the timeline is that we are going to put our consultation or ED forward by the end of this year, December, and with a view to having these standards approved by the end of next year. I'm not going to say September or October or November or December. This would be too risky. I would say at the latest by December 2024 to make sure that they will be ready to be used together with all the other standards that will be necessary, at least to respond to the regulatory requirements under the CSRD that as of January 2025, stability assurance will be necessary. But more in general, because we are aware of the urgency of this project. So I don't know if I responded.
Thanks, Gabriela. And maybe I will just, seeing that Ken isn't here, just circle to James because he sits through all of our meetings and just say, James, do you think there are any big ticket items that we couldn't hear well that you might want to add on to? I do think maybe, and as we wrap this up, Claudia, if there are things where you think we just need to circle back to Gabriela to clarify, let's do that. But we will have another opportunity, and that will be face-to-face, which is always so much more preferable in October. So let me just, so Claudia, I'll leave that to you to decide, but then just also check with James if there's like a big ticket item, James, that you felt we might have missed that you thought you want to flag on behalf of Gabriela.
Thank you. I'll add just 3 quick points. The first one, and I do understand the desire and the optics of definitions and alignment and consistency. I have a lot of comfort in the approach that the IESBA is taking because we have had, and if you think of the day when we came up with role and mindset, and I think the IESBA landed role and mindset just perfectly for the purpose of the code and its application. But if you recall that journey, we used to argue it should just be called professional skepticism. And so we moved from alignment to something that was fit for purpose for the code. And I think that's the principle that the IESBA is following on the definitions. And I think that's the right course of action. Secondly, I know many of you are anxious to see the final words as we move forward. Again, the IESBA, as I observe them, is at the right stage at the right time at this moment. June was very, very principles-based, and the board was grounding itself on its positions. And I think that is essential in order for the technical drafting to proceed. And I think they've been successful in bottoming out those principles. So I think as we move forward, it bodes well for a September and technical development relative to the words. And then finally, I wanted to mention that I do think experts will be a difficult point. There were one or two comments coming from the IESB session with PIOB, which I will pass on to Gabriella and team, or Claudia, of course, as we share the public interest issues. But I think those were also relevant in terms of tone and thoughts. So I will share them with Gabriella as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And Gabriella, I hope it's not a laptop problem and it's just a temporary problem. We all have that from time to time. But thank you so much for your perseverance, and thank you to your staff, and thanks, James, for your clarifications. We are looking forward to touching sides soon on this really important project. We haven't spoken about the tax project, which is something that we can pick up again maybe in September, October, that round. I'm going to ask the board members, as we say goodbye to Gabriella and the IESBA team, to just take a short 10-minute break, because we've been going for a long time. Maybe you can grab some caffeine, and then 15 minutes past the hour, dial into the new link. Thank you. Cheers, everybody.
Very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gabriella. Don't worry about the sound. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.